Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. Today on the channel, we're going to talk about some brilliant B-sides from 1967. A year full of amazing singles, amazing albums. Even the B-sides sometimes equal the A-sides, and sometimes even better the A-sides. So I have 10 here to offer. I'm going to start off here with an absolute classic we've heard about a bazillion times. And I got to tell you, I actually these days, I prefer the shorter AM radio edit of this song. I'm talking about Light My Fire by The Doors. A lot of people prefer the longer version. I've heard it too many times. I'm just a little tired of that instrumentation, those solos, although fantastic. But there's something about just the gist of the song I like. Plus it gets quicker to the end, that finale with Jim Morrison's scream, which I love. To me, that's the highlight of the song. But how about that B-side? The Crystal Ship. What an absolute Doors classic. One of their best ballads, in my opinion. I mean, they wrote a lot of great ballads, but this one is just absolutely magical. A lot of classical influence going on here. Ray's piano playing and his keyboard work, and just Jim's poetic lyrics. Just the whole vibe of it. Sounds so amazing on headphones all these years later. I got to say, Crystal Ship for me is probably one of the greatest Doors songs of all time. One of their greatest ballads, and I got to say, I think it equals Light My Fire or even betters it. Maybe only for the fact that I've heard Light My Fire a bazillion times. But love Crystal Ship by The Doors, #1 hit in the summer of love. How about For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield? Their first huge single. But what about that flip side, right? An incredible Neil Young track, sung by Richie Furay. Do I Have to Come Right Out and Say It? This could have been an equally as great A-side, in my opinion. But again, the B-sides were almost as good as the A-sides back in the day. But a great track here by Neil Young. And on the first Buffalo Springfield album, Neil Young wrote a good portion of the songs, but were sung by Richie Furay. Even later on, with songs like On the Way Home, Richie Furay sung the lead vocal. And of course, there's a lot of great solo renditions of On the Way Home by Neil Young from his Archive series. But I think this is one of his great Buffalo Springfield songs, Neil Young's Do I Have to Come Right Out and Say It, featuring just those three-way harmonies of Furay, Stephen Stills, and Neil Young. Just fantastic. So another great B-side from 1967, Do I Have to Come Right Out and Say It? 1967. Oh, another great one here we have is from the Small Faces. This is such an absolute, if I had to make a list of my top 40 all-time songs, this would be it. Itchycoo Park on the Immediate label, that amazing Pink label, featuring those amazing vocals from Steve Marriott. How about the flip side, though? Oh, my God. I'm Only Dreaming. Have you ever heard this track? It was on the American version of There Are But Four Small Faces. It was also on the self-titled Small Faces album in Britain, I believe. It may not have been, but I know it was on the U.S. version of that album. But just an incredibly soulful vocal from Steve Marriott. These really cool keyboards from Ian. And it kind of starts off quiet, kind of builds up and gets really intense in the middle section. I just absolutely love this track. Just about anything. You could put anything on by Marriott and I'll listen. He's one of the all-time greats. Steve Marriott, and also another good Steve Marriott, Ronnie Lane track. I got to tell you, the Small Faces, at least in the U.S., they just really, still to this day, have not really received their due. They did never tour here in the U.S. I think that might have been the problem. And by the time they broke up, Humble Pie was formed, and the Faces with Rod Stewart. But God, what an amazing band! I'm Only Dreaming, the B-side of Itchycoo Park from 1967. Just fantastic stuff. One of my favorite Beatles B-sides, and not just from 1967, just from their entire discography, is the flip side of All You Need Is Love, Baby You're a Rich Man. Wow, what an amazing track that is. Just pure magic. Another great Lennon track. I don't know if McCartney helped out a lot. Maybe on the chorus, McCartney helped a lot. But it does sound more like a Lennon vocal, Lennon composed track. Very, very magical. Brings back a lot of memories as a child hearing this in the house. We had the Magical Mystery Tour album. And that was on side 2. But yeah, just another fantastic B-side. I like All You Need Is Love, but I actually like Baby You're a Rich Man way better. I think it's one of their great kind of pseudo-psychedelic tracks. Baby You're a Rich Man from the Beatles, flip side of All You Need Is Love from The Summer of Love. How about one of the greatest Who singles ever? Not just from the 60s or the 70s, but just all time. An amazing track, and I think one of their highest charting singles ever. I Can See for Miles. Incredible A-side. And then a really, really great B-side. Mary Ann with the Shaky Hands. This track and the A-side were featured on the Who's Sell Out album. And this particular version of Mary Ann with the Shaky Hands is completely different than the album version on Who's Sell Out. This has a drum beat. The other one is just more, the other one on the album is just more acoustic based with a little bit of percussion. This one has Moon playing, and it has this really cool kind of organ in the background, and it has this kind of vibrato on the vocals, which is kind of cool on Daltrey's vocals. But love this version, and I think it was on the expanded version of Odds and Sods, if I believe, and it's been released in other versions as well as like bonus cuts. I think on the bonus cuts of the Who Sell Out, all the various versions that have been released over the years. But Mary Ann with the Shaky Hands is a fantastic track, funny lyrics, and I think Townsend at this point was just writing amazing pop songs. So I Can See for Miles, the A-side, the B-side, Mary Ann with the Shaky Hands, a completely different version than what is on the album, The Who Sell Out. One of the most famous tracks to enter the top 10 in 1967, Jefferson Airplane's "Somebody to Love," featuring that amazing powerhouse vocal by Grace Slick. And then how about that B-side? She Has Funny Cars, which was the opening track on Surrealistic Pillow. Great B-side here with vocals from Ballin and Kantner and Grace Slick. That classic 3-part harmony going on. Great B-side. Also the first track on Surrealistic Pillow. So great A and B-side here from Jefferson Airplane. One of the biggest hits of 1967 during the Summer of Love. Incredible single. Never gets old. I can hear this till the day I die and never get tired of this track. Whiter Shade of Pale by Procol Harum. And I love the B-side, which was never even featured on any real studio release of any Procol Harum album. Lime Street Blues. Fantastic little B-side here. The first time this was issued was on the 1973 compilation, the U.S. compilation, The Best of Procol Harum. It has that weird black cover with like the stars and planets and everything. But this is a powerhouse little track here. Lime Street Blues, B-side of A Whiter Shade of Pale from 1967. Another great A and B side on the Darum label. How about the Monkees? They had a lot of singles in 1967. These two tracks, though, were never on any album. It was just a standalone single. The A-side was A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You, written by Neil Diamond, sung by Davy Jones. Great track. Love this song. Probably my favorite Davy Jones Monkees track, along with Forget That Girl from Headquarters. Love both those tracks. But the flip side, I think, is just as good or even better. And the song is called The Girl I Knew Somewhere. The Girl I Knew Somewhere, written by Mike Nesmith. Mike Nesmith really wrote a lot of cool tracks in the early Monkees discography. Fantastic stuff here. I love this track, featuring another just stellar vocal by Mickey Dolenz, who doesn't get enough credit for his singing capabilities. I think he's really underrated as far as 60s vocalists go. I love this track, The Girl I Knew Somewhere, written by Michael Nesmith. Flip side of A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You, written by Neil Diamond. How about the Byrds, So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, released in 1967. A lot of people covered this. I think Petty covered this. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Patti Smith covered this too at some point. But great track. But I think even the B-side is 100 times better. One of David Crosby's greatest tracks he has ever written, he ever wrote. Everybody's Been Burned, with incredible lyrics that anybody can relate to. Those really unique guitar chords that Crosby always put forth on these Byrds tracks. And even on that solo album of his, If I Could Ever Remember My Name, David had this way of just throwing in these weird jazz chords and these weird patterns. And they're all over this track here, featuring a really cool kind of avant-garde kind of solo from Roger McGuinn. I think this is an amazing Byrds track, and it's the B-side of So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star. Great, great stuff here. And then last but not least, we'll throw in another Beatles one. And I never understood why this was the B-side, but it is, and I think it's 100 times better than the A-side. I'm talking about the B-side of the single Hello Goodbye, the B-side I Am the Walrus. One of their greatest psychedelic tracks, most experimental tracks, still mind-blowing after all these years. And I gotta really say one thing. That remix, is it Giles or Giles? Giles Martin did on the Blue album is absolutely atrocious. I don't know if any of you have heard that version as the end, you know, as that radio station's tuning in at the very end, at the coda, the closing bit of I Am the Walrus. I don't know what the hell he did in that mix, but he absolutely completely mangled up that version. There's still nothing like the original version of the single or the version on Magical Mystery Tour. I don't know about some of these Beatles remixes, though. Do we really need them? I have to admit, I've bought the box sets, but not for the remixes. I could care less about the remixes. I love all the extras, you know, the studio stuff, the outtakes, the book, but I don't really care for the remixes. I mean, you don't really monkey around the Beatles remixes. They're the definitive versions, in my opinion. So, I Am the Walrus, incredible B-side to Hello Goodbye from 1967. Do you have any more to add to the list? Some cool B-sides from 1967? Let me know in the comments section. As always, thanks for watching. I appreciate it so much. Have a good one. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.